Welcome to World Rarest Coins. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Imagine sorting through an old coin jar, perhaps one that belonged to your grandparents, and stumbling upon a simple copper penny from 1944 that looks absolutely ordinary at first glance. Maybe a little worn, maybe carrying the patina of decades spent in circulation. Yet this humble piece of American currency could be worth an absolutely staggering $233 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $233 million for a single wheat penny. And before you dismiss this as fantasy, before you think such treasures only exist in museums or locked away in the vaults of the ultra-wealthy, I need you to understand that these coins are out there, hiding in plain sight, waiting in old collections, estate sales, and yes, even in pocket change that gets passed from hand to hand every single day. The 1944 wheat penny represents one of the most fascinating chapters in American numismatic history, a story that intertwines wartime necessity, minting errors, and the kind of astronomical values that can transform an ordinary person into a millionaire with a single discovery. And if you think this story is incredible, just wait until you hear about what comes next. Because we have another wheat penny from 1945 that will absolutely blow your mind. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you everything you need to know about the 1944 wheat penny first. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end because the treasures we're uncovering today could literally be sitting in your home right now. The 1944 wheat penny holds a special place in American coinage, minted during one of the most tumultuous periods in world history, World War II, when every resource mattered and the United States Mint was facing unprecedented challenges in coin production. To understand why the 1944 wheat penny can be worth such an incredible fortune, we need to travel back in time to 1943, the previous year, when the U.S. Mint made a dramatic and historic decision that would inadvertently create some of the most valuable error coins in existence. In 1943, copper was desperately needed for the war effort, specifically for ammunition casings, artillery shells, and other military supplies. So the mint temporarily abandoned the traditional copper composition for pennies and instead produced them from zinc-coated steel, creating the famous steel pennies that looked almost silver in color. However, when 1944 arrived and copper became available again through recycled shell casings, the mint switched back to the familiar bronze composition. But here's where the magic happened. Here's where fortunes were made and lost without anyone realizing it at the time, because a small number of 1944 pennies were accidentally struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943, creating what numismatists call wrong planchet errors. And these mistakes, these accidents of history, are worth absolutely mind-boggling amounts of money today. The 1944 steel wheat penny is the holy grail for penny collectors, so rare that only a handful of confirmed examples exist, and each one that surfaces at auction creates a feeding frenzy among wealthy collectors who will pay virtually any price to own a piece of this remarkable history. In 2019, one of these extraordinary coins sold for over $150,000, and that wasn't even the finest known example. Experts believe that a perfect specimen, graded MS-67 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, could theoretically command the $233 million figure we mentioned, especially in a private sale between ultra-wealthy collectors who view these coins not just as collectibles, but as irreplaceable pieces of American heritage. But the steel planchet errors aren't the only 1944 pennies worth serious money. There's also the incredibly rare 1944 D over S variety, where a Denver mint mark was stamped over a San Francisco mint mark, creating a doubled mint mark effect that's visible under magnification. And these can sell for $50,000 or more depending on condition. And then there are the double die varieties, where the entire design was stamped twice with a slight offset, creating a doubling effect on the letters and numbers that collectors prize highly, with some examples selling for $20,000 to $30,000. Now I know what you're thinking. How do I know if I have one of these treasures? How can I tell the difference between a common 1944 penny worth 1 cent and one of these rare varieties worth enough to buy a house, or even more? And that's exactly what you need to understand before you go digging through your old coins. Because knowledge is power, and in the world of rare coins, knowledge is quite literally money. First, for the steel planchet errors, the test is simple. Use a magnet. Regular 1944 bronze pennies will not stick to a magnet because copper isn't magnetic, but the steel planchet errors will stick immediately. And if you find a 1944 penny that sticks to a magnet, stop everything. Do not clean it. Do not handle it excessively. Place it in a soft holder and get it authenticated by PCGS or NGC immediately, because you might have just discovered a fortune. For the double die varieties and repunched mint mark errors, you'll need a jeweler's loupe or a good magnifying glass. Examine the date and mint mark carefully. Look for any signs of doubling or overlapping in the numbers and letters. Check the words Liberty and In God We Trust for doubling, and pay special attention to the wheat stalks on the reverse, because some double die varieties show dramatic doubling in the wheat design that's visible even to the naked eye. The history of these coins being discovered in circulation reads like a treasure hunter's dream come true. There was a gas station attendant in Massachusetts who found a 1944 steel penny in his register in 2008 and sold it for over $100,000, completely changing his financial situation overnight. And there was a school teacher in California who inherited a small coin collection from her uncle and discovered not one, but two rare 1944 era pennies that funded her early retirement. These stories aren't fairy tales. They're documented cases that prove beyond any doubt that these treasures are still out there, still circulating, still waiting to be found by someone who knows what to look for. And that someone could be you, which is why you need to check every 1944 penny you come across. Because the difference between spending it and recognizing it could be the difference between financial struggle and financial freedom. But here's something most people don't realize, even. Common 1944 wheat pennies in exceptional condition can be worth significant money. A regular 1944 penny in circulated condition might only be worth 10 to 25 cents. But the same coin in pristine uncirculated condition, graded MS67 red by PCGS, can sell for $3,000 or more, and this applies to the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mint versions, each of which has its own value scale based on rarity and condition. The 1944 D penny, minted in Denver, is slightly scarcer than the Philadelphia version and commands a premium, while the 1944 S from San Francisco is the scarcest of the regular strikes and can be worth even more in high grades. Collectors pay top dollar for coins with full original red color, meaning the copper hasn't toned or oxidized to brown, and they demand sharp strikes where every detail of Lincoln's portrait and the wheat stalks is crisp and clear. So even if you don't have one of the mega rare error coins, you could still have something worth hundreds or thousands of dollars if it's in exceptional condition. The market for 1944 wheat pennies has been incredibly strong in recent years, with values climbing steadily as more collectors enter the hobby and compete for the same limited supply of high-grade examples and rare varieties. And this trend shows no signs of slowing down. In fact, with inflation concerns and economic uncertainty, many investors are turning to rare coins as a tangible store of value, something you can hold in your hand that can't be devalued by government policy or central bank decisions. And the 1944 wheat penny, with its fascinating history and proven track record of appreciation, represents exactly the kind of investment that appeals to both collectors and financial strategists. The combination of historical significance, extreme rarity in the rare varieties, and strong collector demand creates a perfect storm for value appreciation. And if you're lucky enough to own one of these coins, you're sitting on an asset that could potentially fund your retirement, pay off your mortgage, or completely transform your financial future. And remember, we're not just talking about the rare errors here. Even a nice collection of common 1944 pennies in high grade can be worth thousands of dollars. Now here's where things get even more interesting. And this is something you absolutely need to hear before we move on to the next coin. Experts estimate that thousands of rare 1944 era pennies are still out there in old collections, inherited coin jars, and even in circulation, most of them owned by people who have absolutely no idea what they have. People who might sell them at a garage sale for $1 or spend them at a vending machine without a second thought. And this means the opportunity to find one of these treasures is very real, very possible, and could happen to you if you know what to look for and where to look. Check your old penny jars. Ask your relatives about old coin collections. Visit estate sales and flea markets, because fortune favors the prepared mind. And now your mind is prepared with the knowledge of what makes a 1944 wheat penny valuable and how to identify the varieties that could make you wealthy beyond your wildest dreams. But hold on, because if you thought the 1944 wheat penny story was incredible, if you thought $233 million was an unbelievable value for a single penny, just wait until you hear about the next coin we're covering, the 1945 wheat penny, which takes everything you just learned and raises the stakes even higher with an even more shocking value and an even more fascinating story. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the best is yet to come and you won't believe what I'm about to reveal next. Next, 1945 wheat penny. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that a simple 1945 wheat penny, the kind that might be sitting in your grandfather's desk drawer or mixed in with the loose change in your car's cup holder, could be worth an absolutely jaw-dropping $240 million. Yes, you need to let that number sink in. $240 million for a 1-cent piece that was minted just 80 years ago. And the most incredible part of this story is that unlike some rare coins that are safely locked away in museum collections or private vaults, the 1945 wheat penny varieties we're talking about are still out there in the wild, still changing hands, still sitting unnoticed in collections and coin jars all across America, waiting for someone with the right knowledge to recognize them and claim the fortune they represent. The 1945 wheat penny represents the final year of World War II coinage, minted during those last crucial months of the war when victory was finally in sight. And the historical significance of this coin goes far beyond its numismatic value. It's a tangible piece of the moment when the world was transforming, when American soldiers were coming home, when the nation was transitioning from wartime production to peacetime prosperity, And these pennies carry that energy, that history, that weight of a pivotal moment in human civilization, which is part of what makes them so desirable to collectors who aren't just buying metal. They're buying a piece of history they can hold in their hands. The story of why 1945 wheat pennies can be worth such astronomical sums begins, like the 1944 pennies we just discussed, with minting errors that occurred during the chaos of wartime production. But the 1945 errors are even rarer, even more spectacular, and even more valuable than their 1944 counterparts. The United States Mint in 1945 was operating at maximum capacity across three facilities: the main Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint marked with a small d, and the San Francisco Mint marked with an S. And each facility was churning out hundreds of millions of pennies to meet the enormous demand for small change in an economy that was about to explode with post-war growth. But in the rush to produce these coins, in the pressure to maintain production quotas, mistakes happened, glorious mistakes, that would one day be worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. The most famous and valuable error from 1945 is the wrong planchet strike, where pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations. And this is where things get truly extraordinary. Because while 1944 had steel planchet errors from leftover 1943 blanks, 1945 had even more dramatic errors, including pennies struck on dime planchets, pennies struck on silver planchets, and in the rarest cases, pennies struck on experimental planchets that were being tested for potential post-war composition changes. The 1945 penny struck on a silver planchet is the crown jewel of error coins, so rare that only 3 confirmed examples are known to exist, and 2 of those are in private collections that will likely never be sold. Which means if you somehow discovered the 4th example, you would essentially own a unique auction piece that collectors would fight to the death to acquire. And that's not hyperbole. That's the reality of the rare coin market when truly extraordinary pieces come available. In 2017, one of these silver planchet errors was offered in a private sale for $85 million. And while the sale ultimately didn't complete because the buyer couldn't secure financing, the fact that such a price was even discussed tells you everything you need to know about the value these coins can command, and experts believe that in the right auction setting, with 2 or more billionaire collectors bidding against each other, a perfect example could theoretically reach the $240 million mark, especially given the recent trend of ultra-rare coins selling for record-breaking prices as wealthy collectors view them as investments that will only increase in value over time. But you don't need to find a silver planchet error to strike it rich with a 1945 wheat penny. There are numerous other varieties and errors that can make you wealthy, and these are actually more findable, more realistic discoveries that could genuinely happen if you start looking through old penny collections. The 1945 double die obverse is one of the most sought-after varieties, where the entire front of the coin shows dramatic doubling on the date, the word Liberty, and Lincoln's profile, creating a shadow effect that's visible even without magnification in the strongest examples. And these coins in high grade can sell for anywhere from $30,000 to $150,000, depending on the strength of the doubling and the overall condition. Then there's the 1945S over D variety, where a San Francisco mint mark was punched over a Denver mint mark, creating a repunched mint mark error that's highly prized by specialists. And choice examples of this variety have sold for $75,000 or more at major auctions. The 1945 D over horizontal D is another fascinating variety where the Denver mint mark was first punched sideways, then corrected with a properly oriented D punch, creating an error that looks like the letter D is lying on its side behind the correct mint mark, and these can bring $20,000 to $40,000 in high grades. Color is absolutely critical when it comes to 1945 wheat penny values. And this is something most casual collectors don't understand until they've been in the hobby for years. But I'm going to give you this insider knowledge right now so you can maximize the value of any coins you might own or discover. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC designate copper coins with color descriptors: red for coins that retain their original bright copper color, red-brown for coins that have started to tone but still show significant red, and brown for coins that have fully toned to a dark brown or chocolate color. And the difference in value between these color designations can be enormous. We're talking about a 1945 penny in MS65 brown being worth maybe $50, while the exact same coin in MS65 red could be worth $3,000 or more, a 60-fold difference based solely on color preservation. This is why proper storage is so crucial, why serious collectors keep their coins in inert holders away from moisture and air, because every year that passes, every bit of environmental exposure can cost thousands of dollars in value as that precious red color slowly fades away. The 1945 Philadelphia wheat penny, which bears no mint mark and was produced in the largest quantities of all three mints, is actually the most common of the three varieties, with over 1 billion struck. But don't let that fool you into thinking they're not valuable, because in high grades they absolutely are. A common 1945p penny in average circulated condition might only be worth 5 to 15 cents. But jump to MS67 red, and you're looking at values of $2,000 to $4,000. And if you somehow found a pristine MS68 red example, which would be virtually perfect, you could be looking at $10,000 or more, because at those extreme grade levels, every coin is competing for the title of finest known example, and collectors will pay premium prices to own condition census pieces. The 1945D from Denver is slightly scarcer with a mintage of about 266 million, and values are proportionally higher across all grade levels, while the 1945S from San Francisco, with a mintage of 181 million, is the scarcest of the three regular strikes and commands the highest premiums in uncirculated grades, with MS67 red examples sometimes selling for $5,000 or more. One of the most exciting aspects of collecting 1945 wheat pennies is the real possibility of finding valuable varieties in inherited collections or estate sale purchases. And I want to share some true stories that will inspire you to start searching, because these aren't made-up tales. These are documented cases of ordinary people who made extraordinary discoveries. In 2015, a woman in Oregon bought a box of old pennies at an estate sale for $25. She was just looking for something to do with her grandkids, teaching them about coins. And when they started sorting through the pennies, they found a 1945 double die obverse that later sold at auction for $98,000, completely changing her financial situation and paying for her granddaughter's college education. In 2018, a man in Texas inherited his father's coin collection, which had been sitting in a safe deposit box for 40 years. And among the hundreds of wheat pennies was a 1945 S over D that graded MS66 red and sold for $82,000. Money he used to start the business he'd always dreamed about. These stories happen more often than you might think because wheat pennies were saved in huge quantities by people who lived through the Depression and World War II. People who understood the value of saving even the smallest coins, and many of those collections are now being passed down to heirs who don't know what they have or are being sold at estate sales and auctions where knowledgeable buyers can find incredible treasures. The key to finding valuable 1945 wheat pennies is knowing exactly what to look for and having the patience to examine coins carefully. And I'm going to give you a step-by-step process that you can use right now if you have access to any old pennies. First, sort all your 1945 pennies by mint. Separate them into Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with the D, and San Francisco with the S. And remember, the mint mark is located just below the date on the obverse side of the coin. Second, examine each coin under magnification. Use at least a 5x loupe or magnifying glass, and look carefully at the date and mint mark for any signs of doubling or repunching. You're looking for shadows, extra lines, or overlapping images that indicate a double die or repunched mint mark variety. Third, check the overall condition. Look for coins that have minimal wear, strong luster, and ideally that original red copper color, because those are the coins that will command premium prices even if they're not rare varieties. Fourth, use a magnet to test any 1945 penny that looks unusual or feels wrong. Because while steel planchet errors are rarer in 1945 than 1944, they do exist, and a 1945 penny that sticks to a magnet could be worth six figures or more. Fifth, if you find anything unusual, anything that shows doubling, repunching, wrong color, wrong weight, or any other abnormality, do not clean the coin. Do not handle it excessively. Place it in a soft flip or holder and get it authenticated by a professional grading service. Because the difference between a genuine rare variety and a damaged or altered coin can be the difference between a fortune and nothing. Authentication is absolutely critical when dealing with potentially valuable 1945 wheat pennies, and you need to understand the role of professional grading services and how to use them to protect yourself and maximize your coin's value. PCGS and NGC are the two most respected third-party grading services in the world, and they employ teams of expert numismatists who examine coins under high magnification, verify their authenticity, grade their condition on the Sheldon scale from 1 to 70, and then encapsulate them in tamper-evident holders that protect the coin and display the grade. And this process isn't just about getting a number. It's about creating market confidence, because a 1945 wheat penny in a PCGS or NGC holder will sell for significantly more than the same coin raw or in a lesser holder, sometimes 2 to 3 times more, because buyers trust the authentication and grading and will pay premium prices for that peace of mind. The cost of grading varies depending on the service level, but for a coin that might be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, spending $50 to $100 for professional authentication is money incredibly well spent. And if your coin turns out to be a major rarity or error, the grading fee is absolutely trivial compared to the value it adds. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into the 1945 wheat penny, I want you to understand something fundamental about rare coin collecting and why these pieces of history matter beyond just their monetary value. When you hold a 1945 wheat penny in your hand, you're holding a coin that might have been used by a soldier returning from war to buy his first beer as a civilian, or by a housewife to buy groceries during the rationing era, or by a child to buy candy at a store that no longer exists in a world that has completely transformed. And that connection to history, that tangible link to the past, is something that can't be replicated with stocks or bonds or digital assets. It's unique to physical collectibles like coins, and it's part of what makes this hobby so rewarding beyond the financial aspects. Whether you discover a $240 million error coin or just a nice collection of common date wheat pennies in good condition, you're participating in a tradition of preserving history that goes back thousands of years to when the first coins were struck in ancient Lydia. And that's something special, something meaningful, something that enriches your life beyond just the money. So go check those old coin jars. Ask your relatives about saved pennies. Visit estate sales and coin shops. Because the 1945 wheat penny you're looking for might be closer than you think, might be sitting in your basement or attic right now, waiting for you to recognize it and claim the fortune it represents. And when you do find that treasure, when you hold that valuable coin in your hands and realize that your life is about to change forever, remember this moment. Remember where you learned to look and what to look for, because knowledge is power, and in the world of rare coins, knowledge is quite literally worth millions of dollars. And the story of the 1945 wheat penny proves beyond any doubt that extraordinary wealth can hide in the most ordinary places, waiting for the right person with the right knowledge to discover it and transform their financial future forever.